Audiobook, Entrepreneurial Father, Employed Mother, or Vice Versa. By Milco Baute. Written and published in 2022. Dedication. I dedicate this book especially to parents, who are responsible for the success or failure of their children and future generations. They will be the hope of the world and the future of free civilization. To all entrepreneurs who take risks to become independent and move forward with effort, dedication, passion, and vision, without focusing on obstacles or becoming discouraged by failures, because they know that each failure is a lesson in a learning process toward success. To all those who are content with what they are and what they have, living in the present moment without seeing another vision for the future, who do not take risks because they prefer to remain dependent on jobs, bosses, paychecks, companies, or the state. They work hard to fulfill their assigned tasks but are idle when it comes to thinking about how to generate profits and produce for themselves instead of for others. To those who study and strive to please their parents, society, and the system, spending time they will never recover on careers they will not practice or that will not benefit them, as they do not represent individual prosperity. To those who have already achieved success in what they do and to those who dream of succeeding in something they do not dare to pursue. To the conformists and the nonconformists, to those who fight and those who complain about everything, to the awake and the asleep, to the strong and the weak. I hope everyone can learn something from this book, just as I have learned from others, from life, and from my own mistakes. Affectionately. Milco Baute Lopez. Acknowledgements. I thank Almighty God, my Creator, for life, the salvation of my soul, and the forgiveness of my sins. For guiding me, sustaining me, and lifting me up every time I fall. To my mother, who has passed away, for teaching me through her example, her integrity and perseverance, how to support a family depending on one's own effort and not on external help, an absent father, mere employment, or a paternalistic state. To my father, who has also passed away, for his professionalism, dedication, and talent that inspired me to be who I am. Although he was not present in my upbringing, he never abandoned me. To all my friends who have supported, helped, advised, and encouraged me throughout my life, those who have come and gone, and those who have remained. To all the people I have encountered who have given me a helping hand unconditionally. May God always bless you wherever you are. Preface. If the title of this book reminds you of another book written by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, you are not mistaken. It has a connection in terms of teaching and testimony, but it is based on my personal experience. In my case, although my mother was not an intellectual, having only completed 6th grade, and never gave me direct advice on how to succeed, she taught me through her example. In addition to working as an employee, she was an entrepreneur, a fighter who single-handedly raised 3 sons, all of whom became professionals. This is in a country where entrepreneurship is restricted or persecuted, as the patriarchal government controls and dominates everything. However, she managed to work wonders to sustain her family and elevate us beyond what the state paid her, which was not even enough for a week. After suffering a cooking accident at home that forced her to retire, she decided to open a home-based hair salon and resell dairy products such as cheese, ham, and milk, as well as other goods like shrimp, lobsters, and homemade alcohol, products provided by local merchants. She secretly served her hair salon clients under the watchful eyes of the dictatorship. Meanwhile, I would go out and sell the products she obtained on the streets, ensuring faster sales to increase turnover and generate more income. My father, on the other hand, was the opposite. He was never a businessman but rather a professional employee who remained loyal to his job. However, when he lost it due to his declining mental health and memory loss, he ended up alone and penniless. He was an editor, producer, and writer for Cuban cinematography for almost 40 years. His academic status and professional title earned him a good salary, but when he was forced to retire due to decreased productivity and cognitive decline, he was left with nothing, living in a borrowed room, surviving on a small pension, and lacking the ability to find another way to generate income beyond working for a company. Cuba is a country where the communist regime has ruled for 63 years with no hope of change. Its citizens are forced to resign themselves to living in the same misery year after year, decade after decade. The ones who survive are the most resourceful, entrepreneurs, traders, and those who find alternatives to move forward. The government, which controls everything, jobs, goods, products, and services, pays its citizens a pittance. Due to shortages, even having money is not enough to buy essentials, forcing Cubans to find creative ways to survive, bartering, buying from the black market, obtaining goods clandestinely, and negotiating with others. I saw people in Cuba, loyal to their state-run companies and that oppressive regime, suffer hunger and hardship, even dying from a simple flu due to their inability or unwillingness to seek alternatives to meet their needs. Life in Cuba forces its people to become traders and entrepreneurs. We do not need advice from a non-existent rich dad, because our life circumstances have made us entrepreneurs and negotiators by necessity. My childhood and youth were shaped by an entrepreneurial mother and an employed father. In my own life as a parent, I have also lived the reality of being an entrepreneurial father with an employed mother. I am passing on the same lessons my mother taught me through her example while learning from life and observing how my father and others, who worked hard and professionally all their lives, ended up or died in poverty because they never figured out how to generate money outside of employment, without committing crimes or harming others. Meanwhile, my wife is that employed mother who remains tied to a job, either believing she should not become independent or lacking the courage to do so. For this reason, inspired by my mother's story and my own experiences, I have titled this book Entrepreneurial Father, Employed Mother, referring to the teachings of business magnate Robert Toru Kiyosaki, an expert in financial education, and sharing my own opinions on economic freedom, prosperity, well-being, and debt. Introduction. I do not intend to belittle those who work hard to support their families. In fact, we all must do so, some using physical labor, others using intellect and mental effort. Every job requires effort and a full understanding of the task, whether it is employment, business, investment, or gambling, as long as it does not harm others or involve illicit profit. We all must work, but those who sow today to reap tomorrow can feel free and secure, knowing they will earn money even while sleeping because they have created lifelong residual income. Their families will continue benefiting even after they are gone. It is important to clarify what residual income is. Residual is an adjective referring to what remains or is left over from a whole, whether due to decomposition, destruction, or the full use of something. The term applies across various disciplines to describe what remains from a process, operation, work, usage, etc. In finance, residual income is money that continues to be generated after completing an initial effort, acquiring an asset, or making a profitable investment. For example, I write this book, and later, people pay to read it. Those readers could be anywhere in the world, purchasing the book while I sleep. My work has generated residual income that will continue to grow as more people buy it. In my case, I earn income every month from nearly 70 books I have published. This is not about getting rich, but an extra, unexpected income is always welcome. Others earn residual income by making music, writing songs, producing films, TV series, documentaries, products, tools, food, medicine, and more. To make this more effective, advertising and promotion are very important, whether it be for a job, a service, a product, or an article. He who does not advertise does not sell, and he who does not sell does not earn. We all advertise ourselves. We start with the idea of offering or providing a service using our knowledge to people or companies that need it. Then, we become independent to eliminate intermediaries, free ourselves from salary-based schedules, and earn more than what a company or intermediary pays us. For example, a mechanic, plumber, electrician, refrigeration technician, editor, advertiser, cook, etc., who already has a trade or profession, offer their skills to a company and earns a salary, a percentage, or a commission per hour, per service, or client. In my book The Worst Business, I explain why working for companies or other people is the worst business one can do, as there is little advancement or promotion, and salary increases are sporadic, slow, and insignificant. Some people even have to move to another city, state, or country because their job requires it or because they seek a much higher promotion to move to another level and generate better income in the company they work for. On the other hand, starting your own business, with full knowledge, quality service, guaranteeing eventually growing, and hiring employees to help you, is how one lays the foundation for financial freedom, individual prosperity, and family well-being. This is only achievable in a capitalist country or in a place where personal capital is not an obstacle to prosperity, unlike in a radical leftist patriarchal regime. The same applies to inventors, architects, craftsmen, and product sellers. They start working for others and then create their own businesses or companies. Today, prospering is easier and faster because we are connected to the world in real time, managing businesses and clients with just a phone or computer, which speeds up and enhances efficiency in communication. Many people do not learn to use this essential digital tool for their work, despite it being indispensable in a constantly evolving world. The Internet provides information and training, and has come to improve our lives. Learning as much as possible from it will grant greater freedom and higher income. For example, I learned to publish my own books online and later decided to help others do the same, offering my services based on my time and acquired knowledge. I even wrote a book to guide others on how to write and publish their own books, just as I did, titled, Tips for Writing and Publishing a Book. I took it upon myself to learn so that I would not have to pay others to do it, and today, I generate extra income through my experience in editing and publishing for others. I created my own business, Baute Production Publisher, pay my taxes, help others publish their works, and earn money by doing so. This is not residual income but linear income, as I offer a service in exchange for my time and knowledge. Meanwhile, by selling my books online through Amazon, I earn a certain amount each month, residual income, which accumulates yearly while I am alive and even after I die, as the earnings from book sales will continue to be deposited into my bank account, which my wife and children also have access to. I also learn to file my taxes online every year, which costs me nothing, and I help others by advertising that I can file their tax returns with the U.S. Treasury Department, helping them save on taxes or benefit from state-offered credits for work, businesses, dependents, losses, properties, etc. Additionally, as an electrician I have practiced for 3 decades and still do, I learned to create my own estimates and invoices for my clients. Currently, I assist others in making invoices since they do not know English or have experience with this useful internet-based tool. These small extra earnings add up to a significant amount in the end, providing relief and benefiting my financial independence. I have also worked for Uber, done remote jobs, online, engaged in buying and reselling on eBay, invested in cryptocurrencies, and participated in multi-level marketing. However, I have stopped doing these things because they generate little income, and I do not have the time for them. I am not saying these are bad businesses, it is just that some ventures are worth dedicating more time to because they yield faster results. Anything a person can learn, regardless of age, as long as they have the health and strength to do so, is beneficial. Learning different trades, services, or investments enables quicker financial independence and personal prosperity. Currently, the most profitable sources of income for me are my linear earnings, offering services as an electrician, editor, and publisher, as well as my residual income from 2 Airbnb units I invested in within my property, my home, which I rent out per night, earning much more than a long-term rental under contract. Airbnb is another powerful virtual tool for those who own a property, whether a house, cabin, or rental space. I can confidently say that I have achieved my mission and complete financial freedom, built wealth for my children, and left a legacy. Today, I earn far more than I did when working for other companies, even though I am retired, ill, and in pain at 55 years old. Entrepreneurial father. After learning and engaging in various types of work and experimenting with different businesses, corporate, domestic, investment, and online ventures, some successful, others not, I lost time that cannot be regained in some cases and money in others. But money comes and goes because it belongs to no one, it is merely a public use tool. Since turning 50, I can say that I have finally achieved my goals. Some people reach their goals quickly after immigrating or after putting a plan or dream into action, while it took me over 20 years to accomplish mine. However, of those who manage to become independent or buy houses or properties quickly, I know very few who have maintained them. Many end up losing everything, burdened by debt. They wind up divorced, indebted, sick, or losing their business or assets. Nevertheless, one can always recover from any situation, as I have. The difference is that I first built a home before buying a house. I secured a residual income before leaving my job or ceasing dependence on an employer. Although I attempted to establish a household multiple times, I never dared to buy a house or become independent without first having a solid foundation and a lifelong family. I do not criticize those who take risks in investing and buying when they can afford to, but purchasing a house means debt and expenses that, at the time, I could not afford to lose due to unstable and insufficient income. We cannot change the world, but we can change our world, and our environment, and that is what allows us to make a difference. No one becomes rich working for someone else, and the wealthy do not achieve wealth alone, they always need support, strength, drive, and power. In financial terms, this is called leverage. It is the only way to create and sustain wealth today. This ensures a residual income week after week, month after month. For this reason, and to survive financial crises, large and small companies merge. This is known as corporate mergers. It is the safest way to endure financial crises, economic depressions, and recessions, and it is also the only way to move forward and build wealth. Knowledge is more valuable than gold because, without knowledge, one cannot generate or maintain great wealth. Individual self-improvement efforts are more valuable than physical labor, which many exhaust themselves with, wasting their lives without achieving significant success. Most people act out of habit. Life is a continuous learning process. To achieve stable and lasting success, we must be open to listening, learning, and seizing the moment and opportunities. The world evolves, and we must evolve with it, whether we believe in God or not. The world moves forward, and we must stay ahead if we do not want to become poorer every day. Every day, the rich get richer, and the poor get poorer. The difference lies in how they think and act. If we want to progress and prosper, we must learn from those who have succeeded. To continue doing the same thing every day without different results will only yield the same outcomes, nothing will change. Many people have achieved greatness simply by doing things differently, not by following the current. You may be born poor involuntarily, but you die poor voluntarily. If destiny exists, know that only you can change it. People drown due to panic and fear, not because they don't know how to swim. To avoid drowning in deep waters, one doesn't need to swim but simply float, and we all float. Swimming is for moving forward, not for staying afloat. Do not follow the flow of mediocrity, living in fear, distrust, and selfishness, unless you want to drown in economic crises that only arise to push us to change how we do things, to evolve, update ourselves, and prepare for the future. The world is in continuous change and development. We never move backward, only forward. If you do not have what you want or need, it is because you have not searched for it, have not informed yourself, and are still clinging to the old ways of the world. Progress requires change. Start changing the way you do things, and you will see better results. I do not consider myself an intelligent person, although as it is written, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Therefore, it was a wise decision on my part to dedicate my life to God and follow Christ, my Savior. Without God, intelligence, wisdom, and love are all in vain because God is love. Although I do not consider myself intelligent, I do see myself as a visionary, an awakened person, and a futurist who identifies opportunities or starts something before things change, worsen, or opportunities are lost. Furthermore, if a cautious man is worth 2, then someone as cautious as I am, is worth 1,000. God has given me the vision of an eagle, to see beyond what is in front of me, beyond the horizon, beyond time. And I wish I were as intelligent as many who do not use their intelligence to prepare for the future or to start building it now. If that were the case, I would have already founded an empire or at least built greater wealth and paid it off. Knowledge and intelligence are useless if one does not develop skills and seize opportunities. For example, in my profession as an electrician, which I worked in for 30 years and still do occasionally, I have encountered many highly intelligent colleagues, with greater knowledge than I, even with degrees and certifications I have not achieved. However, because the profession of an electrician, and I believe most trades and professions are similar, requires more practical than theoretical knowledge, since practice builds skill, I turned out to be more skilled and better at meeting my employer's expectations than my academically knowledgeable colleagues. These colleagues did not succeed, if we can say so, as employees because they believed that knowing more allowed them to do things their own way. But when you work for someone else, for another person's company, obedience and efficiency are more important than intelligence or knowledge. Employers care less about what an employee knows and more about how efficient and disciplined they are. They prefer employees who follow instructions precisely and work quickly because time is money, and speed is essential. However, speed without skill leads to failure since rushed work often results in mistakes. In my case, I performed better than my colleagues because I was skilled and did my job well, exactly as required. In 2006, when the economic recession was looming, the company I worked for began laying off employees. Out of 300 workers, only fewer than 100 remained, and I was one of the last to leave, not because I was fired, but because my wife was about to give birth and was living in Peru at the time, so I had to leave the company to travel for a while. The same principle applies to human relationships, marriage, friendships, partnerships, business relationships. Sometimes, we let emotions override logic due to our need to feel appreciated, and loved, to transcend, and to grow. But we must be more analytical because when emotion surpasses reason, many mistakes are made. One must analyze not only the present but also the future of any endeavor, understanding the how, with whom, the advantages and disadvantages, to avoid surprises that could undermine our momentum and increase expenses. This is also true in leadership. Many leaders make mistakes they cannot correct because they focus only on the present moment, failing to foresee potential setbacks, difficulties, and economic crises. They only see profits but not potential losses when starting a venture. And don't think I haven't made these mistakes, I have, multiple times, and I have learned from them, which is why I am now more cautious when experimenting. I prefer to continue with my current trade and business rather than experiment with new ones because my vision is not driven by ambition but by independence. Not every wealthy person is independent. I have learned to be independent without being rich or possessing great fortune. However, as an open-minded person, I do not fear failure because failure can be a stepping stone to success. Through failure, one learns and becomes better prepared. Failure is not an obstacle, it is a lesson. Likewise, death is not the end but a transition. If more people feared death and illness less, they would live longer and healthier lives. I have known people who bought homes, properties, businesses, or invested in equipment and materials before their ventures bore fruit. Of course, investment is necessary, time, money, and resources, but one must have a plan and work with what they have because debt is a curse and a double-edged sword. I have friends who bought houses while their relationships were unstable. Often, when people acquire more possessions, their egos inflate, leading to conflicts. They end up unable to tolerate each other, seeking someone else. Eventually, the relationship falls apart, the family splits, assets and properties are divided, and they lose everything they had built. This happens because they built their home on sand, human emotions and decisions, rather than on rock, biblical principles and Christ. There is no solid foundation, no strong values, no biblical grounding. My advice for couples: seek God first, commit to Him, pray together, grow spiritually through His Word, and apply what you learn in your lives. Love each other without expecting anything in return, and forgive each other because one may offend today, but tomorrow, the other may offend. Any offense, no matter what the degree, is still an offense. One person must yield in an argument, disagreement, or dispute. It is good to defend your opinion and claim your rights, but in this case, the husband must be wise, as he is the head, yielding to his wife's wishes as long as they do not contradict God's principles and teachings. I also know of pastors and servants of God, those with true vocation and integrity, not greedy or ambitious, who take on debt believing that their congregation will be enough to cover it. They miscalculate, relying on their fixed number of members and those who may join later, without considering economic downturns, job losses, health crises, or financial struggles within their church. Churches often fail to grow because they focus solely on maintaining their congregation, entertaining members with concerts, events, activities, and banquets, rather than fostering community with other churches or Christian congregations. They lack miracles, or miracles are scarce, because they are more concerned with fundraising than with discipleship. Every congregation needs to make disciples and send them to preach or establish new churches. These are the churches that grow, not those that merely hold on to what God has given them, like the useless servant who hid his master's talent, Matthew 25:14-30. To prevent financial losses or secure church funds, many churches now require new believers to sign a membership agreement if they wish to attend regularly or become affiliated with the church. However, this only drives people away. Financial commitment should not be demanded by newcomers or new believers. It should be for those who genuinely want to be involved in the church's activities. A better strategy would be to offer Bible courses or spiritual growth seminars at an affordable price. It is better to be visionary, skillful, forward-thinking, and prepared, to have a backup plan and take action without waiting for things to get better or for conditions to be perfect. The future begins now. I am not writing this to boast about myself or to show off my financial success or independence. Rather, my goal is for this to serve as a lesson for others, so they can learn from it. The journey to achieving what I have accomplished has been long, and my race is not yet over, because goals and purpose do not end here. Although I am not ambitious, I am also not a conformist. Things I do for living. These are my tasks, activities, trades, professions, or ways of generating money that I do today. Electrician. Although I have worked for companies both in Cuba and the U.S., today I work freelance, independently, because I have freed myself from the constraints and mediocrity of underpaid jobs, or jobs that appear better paid but still come with schedules, regulations, restrictions, and workplace policies that enforce dependency and demand. Now, I don't work for someone else, others work for me, and I work directly for the satisfaction of the client. Although I have to deal with contractors, I am not their employee, as the client is the one who pays, and I set the prices. Trainer. Although this is not something I do frequently, I haven't completely stopped either. My knowledge has value, and if I can help others learn what I know and improve themselves, to gain independence or earn a better salary, I assist them and get paid for my time and service. When I say trainer, I specify that I train electricians, my trade since 1986, with a course I did, using books and videos. I provide this training in person at my own home and online. Accountant or tax preparer. This is not a profession I studied, like electricity, but something I learned to do for myself and also by helping my older brother file his taxes each year since 2005. By learning to do this online, with the help of the internet and free platforms available to anyone, I saved money by not having to pay someone else. Then, I told myself that if I could help others, I could charge for my time and service. Today, I always have clients, some new, some who return year after year, generating me extra income at the beginning of each year. Writer. This is also not a profession but a vocation, acquired or inherited from my late father, who was also a writer, producer, and editor. I developed this passion as I wrote treatises, articles, opinions, and analyses. Although I write and publish, I do not consider myself a writer, as I am more of a communicator of truth, reason, and reality. I focus on topics such as politics, religion, spirituality, philosophy, economics, and motivation. I do not consider myself a writer because I do not rely on imagination but on information and lived experience to inform rather than entertain. I have never written novels, short stories, or historical documents, though I once intended to write film scripts, something I still want to learn, but time and health have not allowed it. Editor and publisher. Just as I did with tax preparation, learning it for myself to save money, I did the same for my books. After learning to publish my first 3 books online, I told myself that I could also help others do it and charge for my time and service. Since 2016, I have been doing this as a business. Today, I work with other professionals who design, translate, and proofread manuscripts, while I assemble, edit, and publish them. From 2016 to 2022, under the name Baute Production Publisher, we have published more than 170 books for over 80 authors on Amazon and other virtual bookstores. This job, because everything I do is work, along with writing, consumes most of my time, as I do it every day of the week, either for my own books or for others, even though it doesn't pay as well as my other trades. Many don't understand this and think that because I am often at home instead of outside working, I do nothing. However, this is the most exhausting job I currently have, both physically and mentally, because I work in pain, as I have suffered from chronic pain since 2016 when I had to leave my job and find new ways to generate income to support my family and achieve total independence. I do not earn as much as I do from my electrical work, but with multiple income streams, small amounts add up to a substantial or sufficient amount. Rental studios. I call it this because I am neither an investor nor a realtor, although I invested capital in the property, the house, that my wife and I purchased, with my own savings, to build or convert 2 units, specifically, a 1-bedroom studio with a kitchen, bathroom, dining area, and closet, all separate but compact within a space of less than 100 square feet, originally the utility or laundry room. Taking advantage of the existing plumbing connections, I moved the washer and dryer to an outdoor shed and transformed the utility room into a small but functional studio with a bedroom, closet, bathroom, kitchen, and even a tiny dining area, which I currently rent through Airbnb. Once I completed that studio, with the help of a friend who did the walls, floors, cabinets, and plumbing, my wife's help in painting, and my own expertise as an electrician to wire everything, I decided to purchase an RV, caravan, or camper to place on the property beside the house. I not only invested $5,200 plus taxes and transfer fees in its purchase but also in towing it to my property, connecting plumbing, hot water and drainage, repairing the bathroom floor and roof, and buying a sofa bed and an electric mini fridge. I also rent it out on Airbnb, and since March 2021, both units have become our primary source of income. I will explain this more later, not to boast about my achievements but to inform those who know me yet do not understand how I generate income and prosper. Also, for those who criticize me, thinking that I don't work, as if working only means clocking in for someone else. And for those looking to learn new ideas, initiatives, and ways to generate income. Other trades and activities I have done and not completely abandoned include investing, cryptocurrencies and forex, selling, on eBay, and promoting wellness products, basic health and household items. The earnings from my 66 published books also contribute to my income. All of this generates money, small amounts, but money nonetheless, adding up to hundreds of extra dollars per year. I also did Uber for a short time and would do it again, if necessary, though it isn't at the moment, thanks to God. Sitting for long periods is painful for me. I feel more comfortable when I am moving, physically, not just inside a car. Besides, I am not ambitious, and I am content with what I do. Now you have an idea of how hard I work, how I produce, and how I reap the benefits by sowing in multiple fields at once. Everyone owns their time and life. In my case, I do not like wasting time but investing it wisely because it is the most valuable and limited resource we have, not to be wasted or traded for little. Other tasks and activities I frequently do that do not generate money but are work anyway, and require time, skill, and effort, include Washing the sheets and towels of the rental units, as well as cleaning them, although my wife and mother-in-law sometimes help me. While this is part of the business, I don't earn money from doing it, only from the rental itself. Sometimes, I have to do this multiple times a week. Maintaining the garden and yard daily to keep the property clean and impeccable for guests. Placing book orders for the authors I have published. Sending money electronically to people in Cuba without charging interest. Whenever I can help someone without seeking profit, I do it, not for self-glory but because being useful is fulfilling, and serving is a duty. I do everything with passion, love, and dedication, without complaining. Perhaps that is why I prosper and why God helps me. I know many people who work for others and could learn new skills, invest, or start their own businesses but don't, because, in their limited mindset, the only way to earn money is through a weekly or bi-weekly paycheck from an employer. The harder they work, the more bitter they become because they do not truly enjoy it, even if they claim otherwise. The work, labor, trade, or activity one engages in should be done well and with love, whether it is hard, heavy, exhausting, light, or monotonous. One should not always focus on money or see work solely as a means to earn, because work is any task performed, even if it does not generate profit, whether for pleasure, as a hobby, or as a duty, be it personal, familial, or social. I like to work but with purpose. In fact, I always keep myself busy doing something necessary or useful, even if I don't make money from it, because working does not mean earning money, and money is not only earned through work. We all work in one way or another. Even lazy people work, because just the act of sitting, standing, or walking for hours, begging for food, and perhaps even for drinks, on a street corner, intersection, or public place, is already a form of work. Many people invest and generate profits even while sleeping. Others, like writers, myself included, musicians, composers, producers, etc., earn a residual income after publishing their works. In my case, although I cannot rely on this as my primary source of income, I feel satisfied knowing that others read what I write with love and passion, something that takes time but eventually generates income for life, even after I am gone. Since I have more than 60 published works, I earn money every month when people from around the world buy my books. This money will always be deposited into my bank account, which is jointly managed with my wife and children. Anyone who thinks I do not work or that I work little, that I depend on the government, or that my work is easy, is very mistaken. I work every single day, without taking a break. I work more than 8 hours a day. I work through pain, which requires twice the effort compared to someone with enough energy to do heavy labor. I work 3 times more than those around me, and I most likely earn more, even though I do not profit from everything I do. For me, work is neither an obligation nor a necessity, it is a pleasure, just like traveling or eating. Honestly, I prefer working, even if it's just writing, over going out, visiting friends, or receiving visitors. Time is crucial and precious to me, and I must know how to invest and make the most of it. Writing, contributing ideas, reading, and staying informed makes me feel more useful than spending time idly on outings, visits, or meals. However, I am not a hermit. I enjoy socializing, traveling, meeting people, sharing experiences, and spending time with my family. I do not stay home all the time, not even when I am exhausted and in pain, because I want my children to enjoy their childhood and youth. Even if it requires physical effort and enduring my pain, I prefer taking them out because staying locked inside does not allow them to enjoy, learn, or experience life. My story. I was born in 1967 in communist Cuba, under the Castro regime, where a system of shared misery and collective mediocrity is practiced. In this system, it is illegal to prosper, unless you are a Communist Party official or a member of the Central Committee. Those are the privileged ones. The average worker must earn their way forward because socialism rewards commitment, not effort or talent. Of course, a committed and hard-working person is more valuable, but only those with a strong socialist mindset can truly achieve anything under that system. My mother raised 3 sons alone. By the time I was born, my parents were already divorced, and I was the third child. As a result, I did not experience much of a father's presence in my childhood, nor was my father an outstanding parent, as he only contributed 12 pesos per child in support. Meanwhile, he raised another daughter with his second wife, who was not biologically his. My father traveled occasionally, but it was evident that his stepdaughter received better treatment. This does not bother me at all because that girl, now a married woman with children, never knew her real father, so my father was the only father she had, until he divorced her mother. I share this story to illustrate how my childhood was and to show how those who neglect their responsibilities or abandon their families for another end up alone, without one or the other. When I left Cuba in 1995, my father was living alone, and he was not included in the family petition that my mother had filed for my brother and me after she became a U.S. citizen through her father, my grandfather. He eventually passed away alone, without any of his children, neither his biological nor his adopted daughter, who was still living in Cuba at the time but showed no concern for her father. Although I was not an orphan, my mother had to raise her 3 sons as if she were a widow. She worked hard and ran businesses from home. I share more about this in the book I wrote about my mother, in honor of my mother Alicia Lopez, which includes images. Since childhood, as far back as I can remember before turning 10, I was already working at home with my mother and even on my own. When my mother was at work and I had returned from school, it was my responsibility to run the small business at home. I used to sell flavored crushed ice, peanuts, salted pasta that tasted similar to peanuts, and stale bread sold as toast, among other things. My mother would trade her monthly ration cigarettes for cookies or rice. Later, in my teenage years, when she ran a home-based hair salon and sold homemade alcohol, cheese, ham, shrimp, and even lobster, supplied by independent fishermen and producers, I would help her by purchasing salon supplies, washing customers' hair, and selling products both at home and on the streets. She had started these businesses after being forced into retirement due to a health-related incident, an explosion from a pressure cooker that burned her face while she was cooking at home. My childhood was tougher than my teenage years because we lacked many things in a communist country where everything was rationed and limited. The little that could be obtained required great effort, unless you were a committed communist. I remember my mother earning a washing machine, a radio, a fan, another fan, a black and white TV, and then a color TV, not by buying them, but by working hard and being recognized as an outstanding worker. She was not only a top-performing employee but also the administrator of a hair salon, barbershop, and shoe repair shop, all at once. Imagine that in Cuba during the 1990s, even things like pizza and hamburgers from state-run stands had to be earned, because you couldn't just buy them with money, no matter how much you had. Everything was distributed based on a commitment to the so-called revolution. That is why most goods had to be obtained through the black market at high prices. Although my childhood was not ideal, I learned valuable lessons from it. Responsibility. Not to depend solely on a job. To develop multiple skills. To negotiate and earn a living, ethically and legally. Not to expect help from others, whether family, government, or employers. Not complaining, even in tough times. To fight and move forward, even with little or almost nothing. As the Apostle Paul said in Philippians 4:11-12. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in need. A famous quote from Those Who Remain by American author G. Michael Hopp states, "Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times." It is not enough to just think about how to achieve something, you must act and take initiative. Action and patience are required because great things do not happen instantly, they come through time and effort. Unfortunately, in today's modern society and this new century, weak individuals are creating people without values or responsibilities, because everything is handed to them easily. With technology, globalization, fast-paced living, instant gratification, and constant distractions, many people waste time, become idle, get upset over trivial matters, and complain about everything. They feel entitled to things they did not work for, simply because they are part of the millennials, the so-called sensitive and modern generation. After finishing Technical Institute at the age of 16, I was forcibly taken by the communist regime for mandatory military service, with the purpose of further indoctrination and preparing for an imaginary war, an imperialist intervention that would never happen. And I say forcibly taken because neither I nor my parents, nor any parent in Cuba, agrees to have their child taken to become a soldier of the regime or even be sent to fight an internationalist war, in another country on another continent, a foreign war aimed at expanding socialism alongside its allies across the 5 continents. It was almost 2 wasted years because out of the 3 years I was supposed to serve, I only completed a year and a half, followed by 6 months of waiting to be discharged due to health reasons. After leaving the military in 1988, I started working for the state, since in Cuba, all jobs, even those in foreign-owned companies, are controlled and paid for by the government. Since I had studied electrical energy systems for 4 years, I started directly as an inspector for the state electrical company, working across various branches in different municipalities for an average of 5 years. I was earning a miserable wage of 178 Cuban pesos per month, which, at that time, was worth less than $5, in a country where one needed at least $100 per month to live decently. For this reason, I quit my job when I realized that studying had not improved my situation or secured anything in life. In Cuba, a housekeeper, bartender, or cashier at a hotel restaurant or store earned more than a professional. So, I decided to make my own way, as my mother had taught me, by hustling, negotiating, selling, and producing my own income. I didn't seek a job in a tourist hotel, instead, I became my own boss. I worked as a photographer for parties and weddings, a distributor of homemade beverages, shrimp, lobster, cheese, and ham, which others provided to me clandestinely, an assistant in my mother's home hair salon, helping her get supplies, washing clients' hair, and selling products. We were making in 1 week what a doctor earned in a month. These independent businesses kept me going from the time I left my job until I left Cuba, an average of 3 to 4 years. Arriving in the United States. I arrived in the United States on December 10, 1995, but I didn't start working until January 1996, when I got a job in a factory earning $5 per hour. Even working overtime, my paycheck never reached $200 per week because taxes were deducted, and in the U.S., the more hours you work, the higher the percentage of tax deductions from your paycheck. Here, in this land of freedom and opportunity, where prospering is not a crime and where owning a car, business, or home does not mean you are privileged or committed to any government or system, I have worked in many different jobs, always seeking stability and a better salary. Forklift driver, laborer, packer, floor cleaner, gardener, kitchen helper, waiter, mental health technician, caring for people with mental illnesses and addictions, property maintenance worker, electrician, Uber driver, delivery driver. I started earning $5 per hour in 1996 and eventually reached $26 per hour by 2016. However, 2 divorces and a bankruptcy prevented me from rebuilding my credit, buying property, and starting my own business, even though I was always striving for independence. Despite these challenges, I treated myself to traveling to various countries. But in 2007, due to the economic recession in the U.S., which left many people jobless, living in their cars, or even under bridges, I decided to move to Peru. I was able to save money and invest it in Peru, which allowed me to settle there for 4 years with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. Living in Peru, from 2007 to 2011. During those 4 years, I traveled back and forth between the U.S. and Peru, staying in my apartment or at my mother's house when I was in the U.S. However, I spent more time in Peru because money lasted much longer there. That was the reason I decided to live there and start a family. Both of my children were born in Peru. At first, I invested in a house with a garage. We lived upstairs, and downstairs, in the garage, we set up a video game business. Later, we expanded it with 10 computers connected to the internet, turning it into an internet cafe. However, it did not generate enough income to cover all my expenses, so I returned to the U.S. to work. Before leaving, I sold all the computers and moved with my wife and newborn daughter into a studio apartment. I invested part of the money in the forex market, currency trading, and used another portion for my plane ticket back to the U.S., where I stayed for 3 months before returning to Lima for another 9 months. During those 9 months, I lived worry-free, without work obligations, enjoying my wife and daughter, going out, and living with financial freedom, something very few people experience. We managed our money wisely, avoiding unnecessary expenses since my wife was not working. Returning to the U.S. and rebuilding my life. Investing in forex or any other type of asset is never guaranteed, but at least, it allowed us to live those 9 months freely, without being tied to a conventional job, swapping hours for a salary that wouldn't be enough. During that time, I also invested in the wellness industry in network marketing, but only as a side business, not as a stable income source. Between 2007 and 2011, I frequently traveled between the U.S. and Peru, working in the U.S., to save money and returning to Lima to be with my family, until we were finally able to move permanently to the U.S., once my wife's visa was approved. By then, my second child had turned 1 year old. During those 4 years, I earned just enough to support my family and eventually bring them to live with me in the U.S. However, when I returned, I had to struggle alone again, without even owning a car for transportation, which is essential in Florida. The car I had before moving to Peru was towed away from where I had left it parked, so I returned without a vehicle. When I brought my family to the U.S., that was our biggest challenge. Despite this, we moved forward, though with effort and sacrifice. Starting over in Florida, from 2011 to 2014. After arriving in Miami, we rented a studio apartment. I rented a 3-wheeled food cart for $20 per day and sold hot dogs and flavored ice in Hialeah. I earned less than $100 per day, subtracting the $20 cart rental fee. We survived on this for 2 months until a pastor friend from Houston, Texas, offered us his house and car so we could move there. Between 2011 and February 2012, we lived in an apartment in a condo, where I worked as a maintenance worker. The rent for a 2-bedroom apartment was $700 per month, but it was deducted from my paycheck. My job provided a landline phone, which was also my work tool. This job allowed me to buy my first car since returning from Peru. My wife didn't need to work until 2017 because our children were still small. Returning to Miami and moving to Tampa, from 2013 to 2014. In February 2013, we moved back to Miami because our son had asthma, and I had a job offer. However, we couldn't find a rental apartment, even with enough money, so we lived in a friend's studio for a year and a half. In 2014, we had to leave suddenly because the owner sold the house. Finding a home in Miami was impossible, so we moved to Tampa, where I lived from 1995 to 2002. Tampa is a better city, less crowded, with more jobs, better pay, and lower costs. Since 2014, Tampa has been home to my family and me. From 2014 to 2016, I worked through employment agencies as an electrician for various companies. However, by September 2016, I became completely incapacitated and could not return to work due to my last severe back pain crisis caused by herniated discs. Until then, my income had been stable at around $2,800 gross per month, sometimes a bit more with overtime. At that time, my wife was still not working since our children were still young. In 2016, after publishing 4 of my own books, I began publishing books for other authors and offering electrician training courses in a borrowed space. Since I was unable to work 40 hours a week for a company, these became my sustainable sources of income. Although every beginning was slow, and we went through difficult times, I was always able to pay my rent and bills on time. Even though I was earning less than I did when receiving paychecks from companies, my business and income gradually grew. Employed mother. My wife, an employed mother, was working as a kindergarten teacher in Peru when I met her in 2007. However, when she became pregnant, she had to leave her job due to a high-risk pregnancy. That same year, I opened a business in Peru under her name since she was Peruvian, and I was only a U.S. visitor. I rented a house with a garage, and we opened a video game and internet business, as I mentioned earlier. However, it did not turn out as expected because I was earning only per hour, based on what customers, mostly kids and teenagers, paid. I admit that my mistake was not listening to my wife when she suggested opening a liquor store instead, because this is a very profitable business in Lima, and the income is not dependent on hourly customers. I knew this type of business because I had done it in Cuba, but at that time, due to my Christian principles, I did not approve of the idea. From 2007 to 2017, my wife did not need to work. Although my salary as an employee was not high, it was enough, and we were making steady progress. At least, she was able to raise our children full-time until they started kindergarten. For 10 years, she never had to work for someone else. However, she also didn't generate income because, despite being a wonderful woman, she did not have the skills or interest to start a business. She doesn't like taking risks, learning new things, or experimenting with business ideas. Attempts to involve my wife in business. In 2010, when she arrived in the U.S., I registered her in a multi-level marketing business that required no investment or capital. All she had to do was promote household products. However, since she did not have a car and our children were still very young, she never got involved in it, not even by phone. Even though I put the business under her name, I had to take care of everything myself. When someone has enthusiasm and motivation, they can do any business work, because they are not harming anyone, on the contrary, they are providing a service. In this case, we were promoting wellness products available exclusively online through www.melaleuca.com, which offers over 400 daily use household products. My wife entering the workforce, 2017. In 2017, my wife had to find a job due to our financial need, as I was unable to work 40 hours per week for any company because of my worsening health condition. Since then, she has been working at a rehabilitation center, depending on a fixed schedule and salary in a company that doesn't even offer vacation pay or benefits. The reality is that she doesn't need to work now because we have prospered, and her income is not essential. But she wants to work to save money and afford extra comforts. Even though 2017 was a tough year for us, we overcame it, rebuilt ourselves, bought our house, and invested in expanding and renting out part of it, in addition to the extra income streams I previously mentioned. Different approaches to teaching our children. While my wife, an employed mother, teaches our children through her example that working hard for others is how to earn a living, I show them that they don't need to depend on a job or a company. I teach them that they must learn various skills to survive, be prepared, and be equipped to face crises and prosper, things they won't learn in school. My wife thinks like Robert Kiyosaki's Poor Dad, believing that our children should go to college, even if it means taking on debt, so they can get better jobs and support their families. I, on the other hand, teach them that school does not guarantee anything. University is only practical and useful for careers like science, medicine, engineering, etc. University does not guarantee success or financial freedom, it only prepares people to become employees for large corporations. Basic education is necessary, and I explain this to my 12-year-old son, who does not like school. However, I tell him that if he wants to be wealthy, achieve goals, or succeed financially, he must study and learn from those who have already achieved success. I bought him 5 books by Robert Kiyosaki so he can start reading and learning how to generate passive income, acquire assets, plan, build capital, and seize opportunities and crises, because while some people lose their jobs and go bankrupt during a crisis, others prosper. I explain this in detail in my book, How to Turn Difficulties into Opportunities. Investing in property instead of college savings. For a time, we saved money for our children's college education. However, when the 2020 pandemic hit and everything shut down, including banks, I feared what was coming. I suspected that if we left our money in a savings account, we might lose it, so I immediately decided to invest it in a house. At that time, we were still renting an apartment when the 2020 pandemic began. Since my wife had been working for nearly 2 years, we were building her credit. I decided to research whether her credit score was high enough to apply for a mortgage. At that time, house prices were lower and still affordable. My goal was to buy a 3-bedroom house in good condition and close to our current area so we wouldn't have to change schools. First, I contacted a well-known realtor, who gave us the number of a lender. However, the lender never responded or returned our calls. Then, my wife ran into the mother of one of our daughter's classmates, who happened to be a realtor and offered to help us. She connected us with another lender, who responded immediately and began the process very quickly. I thank God for these 2 people. Since my wife's credit score was not enough to qualify for a $200,000 loan, the approximate price of a 3-bedroom house at the time, the lender ran my credit as well. To my surprise, even though I was retired due to disability, my credit was approved for a $250,000 loan. I never thought that being on disability would allow me to qualify for a mortgage. And that's how, right in the middle of the 2020 pandemic, we bought our house, just in time. I share this story to emphasize that saved money that is not invested is stagnant money. If any of my children decide to go to college, we already have the capital and initial investment for it. They won't need government loans or debt because, when I finally saw the property we bought, I recognized its investment potential. With a small investment, I converted the utility or laundry room, which was attached to the house but independent, since it already had water connections. Now, I have a house that is not a liability but an asset, meaning it is not a debt but an investment. With the 2 rental units we created for short-term stays on Airbnb, the house pays for itself, not only covering the mortgage but also other bills, including credit cards. This is why I say that my wife does not need to work. However, I am more involved in managing the business because I built it myself, and it is my responsibility to provide good service as a host. Buying the house was a timely decision, and today, my wife and children have seen a dream come true. Had it not been for the pandemic, we would likely still be saving with greater effort, limiting ourselves from traveling, going out, enjoying, or making purchases, all for the sake of paying a high price for our children's professional education, which would not guarantee them financial freedom, independence, or well-being. At that time, we had debts and bills to pay out of our own pockets, while we were still renting. I explain all of this in my book, How to Turn Difficulties into Opportunities, where I provide foundations and advice on how to apply these concepts and start building the future now. An employee's mindset versus a business mindset. To illustrate how an employee or someone unfamiliar with business thinks, let me share an anecdote. One day, I told my wife that we needed to find a new auto insurance company because we were paying too much. Progressive offered me a $222 discount for 5 months if I paid the full amount up front. But it wasn't just the $222 savings, we would also save $53 per month, adding up to another $265. In total, we would save $487. However, my wife was only concerned about paying $980 upfront instead of the $275 monthly payment we had been making for 2 cars in Florida. With Progressive, I was eliminating the middleman, dealing directly with the insurance company, and securing a $500 discount, even though I had been with my previous insurance company for 8 years, paying higher rates each year instead of getting a discount. Since I am the head of the household, I decided to go through with the change despite our disagreement. This situation motivated me to write this book. Many people fail to analyze the benefits of savings. They hesitate to invest more money in the upfront, even when it leads to hundreds of dollars in savings within months and over 1,000 in a year. That is why business decisions should be made logically, not emotionally or based on appearances. Such savings translate into increased income, a free passive asset, or an investment that yields greater returns. At the end of the day, we had the money saved, and we didn't need to make sacrifices or limit ourselves in those months. What is public education for? I am not against basic education, elementary and high school, or teachers. However, I oppose the education system, which changes and deteriorates every year, especially in these times of crises and pandemics. The school system exists to create educated workers, trained to serve and obey. No public or private institution will teach our children about finance or how to become true entrepreneurs, independent, and financially free, not even in economics and finance degree programs in private institutions. Freedom and individual independence do not benefit the people who run the education system, academics, teachers, or tutors, especially in the public sector. Education as indoctrination. School is not just a center for academic and didactic preparation, it is a training, recruitment, and indoctrination center. Children, especially young students, are forced to adopt progressive ideas. Unfortunately, politicians have handed over institutions to progressive agendas, and we have allowed it to happen. Slowly and covertly, they have turned the education system into an ineffective structure, one that fails to foster individual prosperity, ethical and moral values in society, and spiritual principles. From evolutionary theory, egalitarianism, diversity, multiculturalism, gender ideology, inclusivity, and the ineffective, unnecessary content in science and literature courses, children and young people are being morally corrupted. They are being prepared to live in an increasingly dysfunctional society while memorizing useless concepts and equations they will never use. This hinders intellectual development and prevents the creation of truly brilliant minds. Lessons from my parents' experience. My mother was a smart and hardworking woman. Even though she only completed the 6th grade, she earned more than a doctor. As a single mother, she raised 3 children alone and, out of necessity, became a natural entrepreneur. She worked for companies but also ran businesses from home, negotiating anything she could. And she did all of this without resources or the internet. On the other hand, my father was a respected professional. Although he had the opportunity to travel abroad, he lived and died in poverty. He couldn't even support his children properly, leaving my mother to bear full responsibility while neglecting his financial duties as a father. This made me reflect and realize that school does not guarantee success or financial security, which are the foundation of personal freedom and family stability. Breaking free from the employee mindset. After graduating as an electrical energy systems technician and working for state and private companies, I achieved nothing significant, until I followed my mother's path and found ways to generate income without depending on a job or exchanging hours for a paycheck. For over 30 years, I was dependent on this system, working full-time and overtime, only to remain stagnant. I wasn't reaching my personal goals because I was trading time for money, accepting a low salary, and dealing with endless economic inflation. This kept me enslaved to a system that, between lost time, stress, and exhaustion, never allowed me to build wealth or create an economic foundation for well-being. I was not living in poverty, but I had financial limitations. My perspective on my children's education. Thanks to God, I have 2 academically gifted children who attend a public magnet school for talented and gifted students. However, whenever a student tests positive for COVID-19, the school forces them to quarantine at home for a week. This causes them to fall behind in their studies, which unavoidably lowers their academic performance. I find this policy unfair and authoritarian, forcing everyone to conform to the same standards and suffer the consequences of a virus that can be controlled with proper remedies. I tell my son not to stress about school matters because, in reality, school is useless and does not guarantee success in life. Everything depends on him, his ideas, and what we, as parents, teach him and help him achieve. I hope that if he works for others, he will be so brilliant that he contributes more to society and his family's well-being than to the company he serves. I don't want him to live like a slave. I want him to recognize his value and be rewarded for his knowledge, talent, hard work, and dedication. If he chooses to do something in life, he must do it well, otherwise, he should let someone else do it and just be another mediocre person working out of necessity and constantly complaining. Robert Kiyosaki's opinion on education. In his book Business School, Robert Kiyosaki discusses the three types of education that we either receive or should receive throughout our lives. Here's what he says. In my other books and educational programs, I refer to the three types of education required if we want to achieve financial success in life: academic education, professional education, and financial education. Academic education. This type of education teaches us how to read, write, and use mathematics. It is an important form of education, especially in today's world. Personally, I did not do well in this area. For most of my life, I was an average student because I never had much interest in what was being taught. I am a slow reader, and I don't write well. Even though I read slowly, I read a lot. I just do it at my own pace and usually have to go through a book 2 or 3 times before fully understanding it. Additionally, I am not a great writer, but I continue to write. As a side note, even though I am not the best writer, I have been fortunate to have 6 of my books make it onto the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Business Week bestseller lists. As I mentioned in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I am not a good writer, I am a good seller. The training from my rich dad proved successful, even though I didn't excel in school when it came to my grades. Professional education. This type of education teaches us how to work for money. When I was young, the smart kids became doctors, lawyers, and accountants. Other technical schools trained people to become medical assistants, plumbers, builders, electricians, and mechanics. If you look in a phone book, you will find pages filled with professionals who help others find a job. Since I did not excel in academic education, I was not expected to become a doctor, lawyer, or accountant. Instead, I attended school in New York, where I became a naval officer and sailed on oil tankers for Standard Oil and passenger ships like those in the TV show The Love Boat. After graduating, since it was during the Vietnam War, instead of working in the shipping industry, I went to Pensacola, Florida, where I attended flight school for the U.S. Navy and became a Marine Corps pilot in Vietnam. Both of my fathers, Rich Dad and Poor Dad, believed that it was a son's duty to fight for his country, so my brother and I volunteered. By the time I was 23 years old, I had 2 professions, one as a ship officer and the other as a pilot. But in reality, I never used either one to earn money. As an interesting note, it is ironic that the profession I am most known for is being a writer, a subject I failed twice in high school. Financial education. This type of education teaches us how to make money work for us instead of working for money. Unfortunately, this third level of education is not taught in most schools. My poor dad believed that a good academic and professional education was all a person needed to succeed in the real world. My rich dad said, if you have poor financial education, you will always work for the rich. Is financial education really important? Look around, you will see that no one teaches you or your children how to handle money. Isn't that the truth? We spend most of our lives trying to earn money, yet nobody teaches us how to acquire, manage, spend, or invest it. The lack of financial education is one of the biggest flaws of today's academic system. Schools train us to become excellent employees, but no one teaches us how to take control of our financial future. We live in a time when we have the most highly educated generation in history, yet we are also in the most competitive and demanding society ever. This is why financial education is more important than ever. How can financial education be developed? I have always wondered. Why doesn't the school system teach people about money? Many school teachers, like my poor dad, view money as something bad. But whether we are rich or poor, we all use money. Whether we are governments or businesses, we all use money. Whether we are employers or employees, we all use money. So why aren't we taught about it? Because many people think money is dirty. When I read a financial statement, it tells me someone's life story. I can determine whether they will be rich or poor very quickly because numbers tell a story. The second most important part of financial education is words. In my new book, I talk about how my bankers asked for my financial statement instead of my report card. Banks don't care about my school grades, they want to see my financial statements. That's when I realized something. My poor dad spoke like a schoolteacher, he used the words of a teacher. Meanwhile, my rich dad spoke the words of a capitalist. If you want to be rich, you need to learn the language of the rich. Financial literacy is about understanding words, reading financial statements, and knowing how money works. The mindset that determines wealth or poverty. After writing so many books and doing so much research, can I summarize my best strategies for an average person to achieve financial independence? Yes. A poor person starts with a poor mindset. They say things like, "I can't do that. I'm not interested in money. I will never be rich." The worst thing a poor person says is, "I can't afford it." If you say, "I can't afford it," you become poor. You become your thoughts and actions. If you say, "I can't do that," you become poor because you have a mental mindset of failure. This is why words are probably the most important factor in financial success. Never say, "I can't afford it." Instead, ask, "How can I afford it?" That is where financial growth begins, by changing your language and learning the vocabulary of the rich. Words have the power to make you rich or poor. The cash flow quadrant, the 4 types of people in business. The quadrant is how my rich dad explained the 4 different types of people in the business world. They are E. Employee. S. Self-employed or small business owner. B. Big business owner. I. Investor. For example, Bill Gates and Richard Branson are in category B, big business owners. The owner of a local fried chicken restaurant is in category S, small business owner. The difference between a small business owner and a big business owner is simple. If a small business owner, doctor, lawyer, retailer, stops working, their income also stops. If a big business owner stops working, their income continues. This is the difference between financial struggle and financial freedom. Big business owner continues to increase their income whether they work or not. Employees, on the other hand, are always looking for jobs. They seek better paying jobs and job security above all else. The self-employed believe that if they want something done right, they have to do it themselves. That's why they often work alone and tend to stay isolated. This is why employees, E, and self-employed individuals, S, are completely different types of people. A big business owner, B, is different from a small business owner because their business continues to generate income even when they are not working. An investor, I, on the other hand, is looking for low-risk, high-return opportunities with the greatest possible security. So, there are 4 different types of people. If you want to succeed in today's world, you have to be more than just one type. For example, if you are an employee, it would be wise to also become an investor because fundamental values change over time. Many times, an employee who values security looks for safe investments, which is why they often make the worst investments. Beginner investment advice. If someone were to start with financial investments, what advice would you give to a newcomer? If you want to understand financial investments, there are many things to consider. The number 1 rule is to start small and not worry about the money. Instead, focus on education. For example, I once met a guy at the Auckland airport in New Zealand who told me he had bought 6 houses. I asked him, "What have you learned?" He said, "What I've learned is that it gets easier every time. The first one was hard, the next one was easier, and by the fifth one, it was much easier. So, what actually grows is not just your money, but your knowledge. If you haven't made a single dollar yet, of course, it won't be easy at first. That's one of the most important lessons about starting in investment. The second most important thing is to have an exit strategy. Every investor, in the cash flow quadrant owns an asset. So, before I enter a deal, I always ask myself, if things go wrong, how do I exit? If things go well, how do I exit? The average investor simply jumps in. I call this the buy, hold, and pray strategy. For example, they buy a stock at $10, it rises to $50, then drops to $20. Instead of selling, they hold on to it and pray that it goes back up. That is not a smart approach. How the rich invest differently from the average person. Let's move from beginner investors to those who are highly skilled and sophisticated. Are there special investment strategies that the wealthy use that are different from the average person on the street? Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned during the National Achievers Congress, NAC, the average middle-class person believes that it takes money to make money. Investing is risky. These beliefs are what keep them stuck. However, if you change your reality and adopt a completely new mindset, you will discover that it doesn't take money to make money. Investing is not risky. I always tell people, if you knew that you couldn't lose and that you didn't need money to start, what would you do? How rich could you become? Until someone is willing to pay the price of learning through trial and error. Change their thinking patterns. Shift their reality from working a job or seeking job security to building wealth. They will struggle financially. Sure, they can live a comfortable life, but they will never achieve financial freedom. For me, financial freedom is the ultimate goal. It allows me to avoid financial risks. Make as much money as I want. Prove that it doesn't take money to make money. It's a different reality. But there is a price to pay to reach that reality. Why school will never make you rich or financially free. Schools are designed to reproduce existing knowledge, not to create new knowledge. If you want to break free from the limitations of the educational system, you have to think outside the box. This is both amazing and terrifying. Consider this famous quote from John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest man who ever lived. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. Why is this scary? Because John D. Rockefeller created the General Education Board, which shaped our modern school system. Rockefeller needed employees, so he built a system to mass-produce them. It's not a coincidence that financial education is not taught in schools, because financial education promotes independent thinking. The biggest lie about higher education. When I was young, my poor dad always told me that the best way to succeed was to go to school. He believed that getting a degree was the best way to land a good job. After all, it was the path he had taken. He had several advanced degrees and was the superintendent of Hawaii's school system. The problem was that, even though my poor dad was one of the most educated people I knew, he was always struggling with money and unhappy with his job. My rich dad, on the other hand, never graduated from college. He had to drop out of school to help run his family's small business, which started as a local store. But he became incredibly wealthy and successful, eventually building a real estate empire that included a beachfront hotel. One day, my rich dad told me, "School teaches you to be an employee. If you want to be rich, don't count on school." I followed his advice, and from an early age, I realized that the promise of higher education leading to success was one of the biggest scams in existence. In fact, my research and real-life experience confirmed that the idea that college is necessary for success is a dangerous lie. Of course, this doesn't mean that attending a good school prevents success. That's not true either. There are plenty of people who attend top schools and become successful. The point is, You don't need to go to a good school to be successful. The student loan crisis. As USA Today reports, it was big news when outstanding student loan debt surpassed credit card debt, then exceeded $1 trillion for the first time. That shocking statistic continues to rise with no signs of slowing down. Americans now have over $1.4 trillion in unpaid student debt, according to the Federal Reserve. Students are drowning in debt, yet schools don't teach them how to manage money. What is the average student debt today? Currently, the average student loan debt for graduates is $32,731. Many graduates don't believe their degree is worth the debt. Even worse, this debt forces students to remain stuck in unfulfilling jobs just to make their loan payments. End of Robert Kiyosaki statements. Jeremy Boring on education and financial freedom. Jeremy Boring, co-founder and CEO of the Daily Wire, has a lot to say about education and financial freedom. At a recent conference, he shared the following thoughts. Is college the path to success? Perhaps the dumbest thing you can do is go to the place that's supposed to make you smart, that would be college. Now, maybe that statement needs some nuance. I don't have a college degree, yet I employ many people who do, some of them from the most prestigious universities in the country. I made a conscious choice. I had clear professional ambitions, and I didn't see how a college degree would help me achieve them. Looking back, I am certain that I made the right decision. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of the Daily Wire, a news and commentary platform with a conservative viewpoint. We have over 100 employees and an audience of millions every day. Now, I have no issue, if you choose to go to college. This is a free country, do what you want. But the idea that college is somehow the great path to success and fulfillment? I don't buy it. The left has a very different perspective. They are obsessed with higher education. To them, it's a human right. And they want it to be free, which means that people like me would have to pay for it, for any 18-year-old who can breathe. From their viewpoint, this makes sense. First, this idea is very popular among young people, a critical voting bloc. After all, who doesn't want something for free, especially something that costs more than a Ferrari? Second, universities exist to do one thing: create conformity of thought. And since college professors and administrators overwhelmingly lean left, they know that most of their students will end up thinking like them. Does America's education ranking matter? But, you might say, the U.S. is falling behind. Don't you know that we rank 13th in the world for reading, 18th in scientific literacy, and a miserable 37th in math? To which I respond. So what? It wasn't Singapore that split the atom. It wasn't Estonia that mapped the human genome. The United States is number 1 in Nobel Prizes awarded. Number 1 in scientific citations issued. Number 1 in popular entertainment. Number 1 in technological advancements. Who made this possible? Here are some of the people who practically invented the modern world. Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Michael Dell, Larry Ellison. None of them have a college degree. Many CEOs who run the companies they created have degrees, but the founders don't. What they do have are qualities that universities cannot teach. Curiosity, ambition, a willingness to fail. These qualities almost guarantee success. A college diploma does not. College versus innovation. Do you want to build an airplane? Yes, it's helpful to have engineers trained in aerodynamics. But do you want to invent an airplane? Then you need a couple of restless bicycle repairmen. That's what the Wright brothers were. The problem isn't that universities aren't teaching, it's that they are often teaching the wrong things. Or, they are teaching the right things in the wrong way. The university problem: teaching conformity instead of innovation. Tech entrepreneur David Gelernter once said, What I do not look for in a developer is a degree in computer science. This is coming from a man who teaches computer science at Yale. Billionaire tech investor and PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel actually pays people not to go to college. Both Thiel and Gelernter understand that universities are factories. And like all factories, they want to produce a consistent product. That means they produce people who all think the same way. However, innovation and entrepreneurship require people to think differently. Why universities can't teach innovation? Innovators invent things. Universities only teach those inventions after the fact. If professors could have taught engineers how to build an airplane in 1903, they would have built one before 1903. If they knew how to create personal computers, Microsoft, and social media, they would have done so before the innovators did. And this isn't just about big tech. 56% of all small business owners in the U.S. do not have a 4-year degree. That's right, most small business owners, who employ more than half of all American workers, never attended or never finished college. Is college necessary for success? All of this tells me that while college is useful for some people, it is by no means necessary for everyone. It is not essential for economic success, individual achievement, national prosperity. No one is denied the opportunity to succeed just because they can't afford college tuition. In fact, if you go to college, you are far more likely to be taught how not to succeed. If I were you, I'd think long and hard before paying for that. Robert Kiyosaki on debt. Do you want to know how to turn debt into an asset? With these financial tips, you'll learn how to make the impossible possible. Do you know how to create wealth using debt? Yes, it may sound utopian, but the reality is that there is a method to achieve this. By following Robert Kiyosaki's techniques, you can avoid toxic debt and use debt strategically to generate wealth. Understanding debt, a universal challenge. Almost everyone encounters debt at least once in their lifetime. Whether due to economic crises, work-related issues, investment failures. Debt can accumulate, and numbers stop adding up. Even if you take precautions, even with savings set aside for emergencies, it's not always enough. The situation can feel overwhelming, especially if you have a family that relies on you, are running a business, are trying to develop your professional career. However, we can educate ourselves to take economic measures that will benefit us in the short, medium, and long term. If these strategies come from a business magnate like Robert Kiyosaki, they are surely useful. Kiyosaki, a renowned entrepreneur, writer, and investor, has published more than 20 books on financial education. Kiyosaki's philosophy on money and wealth. Throughout his various books, Kiyosaki reflects, provides examples, and shares inspiring experiences of people who have achieved success simply by changing their mindset about money in business. For Kiyosaki, anyone can achieve a good level of prosperity, as long as they educate themselves, because information is key. He argues that our society prepares us to be employees, not entrepreneurs, so we lack financial education that would allow us to develop and manage a business. Understand the world of investments. With his Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, he seeks to spread everything he has learned since his beginnings as an investor. How to use debt to build wealth. You have probably wondered, how can I create wealth with debt? If such a thing even exists. Although it may seem unbelievable, for Kiyosaki, not all debt is bad. You just need to understand how and why you are taking on certain types of debt. Step 1. Recognizing your financial responsibility. First and foremost, you need to be honest and acknowledge your responsibility on the matter. Sometimes, we find ourselves in debt we didn't create, but most of the time, we generate it ourselves. It is crucial to understand the root cause of our financial problems to generate drastic solutions. If we make decisions that only patch up a problem, we may feel comfortable for a while, but sooner or later, we will face a similar or even worse situation. This is why we must analyze our spending habits, evaluate how we manage our salary, and determine if we budget properly. Step 2. Understanding good debt versus bad debt. Although it may seem strange, there is a method to learn how to use debt to create wealth. Kiyosaki distinguishes between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt. Bad debt is any debt that does not generate a cash flow in our hands. Examples: credit card debt for unnecessary expenses, loans for travel or luxury items, debt that only leads to financial losses. This type of debt drains your finances and does not produce any return. Good debt. Good debt, on the other hand, is debt that generates a fixed and periodic income. How is this possible? A concrete example is real estate investment. You might take out a loan to buy a house or apartment. After making this investment, you rent the property. This generates a monthly income that allows you to pay off the loan, possibly earn extra income. Thus, turning debt into an asset is not an impossible idea. Many people talk about investing in real estate, and Kiyosaki warns that it is important to seek investments that generate an immediate cash flow. Buying just to wait for prices to rise is not a smart decision, especially for beginners. Step 3. Alternative methods to create wealth using debt. Real estate is not the only way to build wealth through debt. Another great tool, if you have the ability to invest, is buying bonds in the stock market. Here, the logic is reversed. Instead of borrowing money, you lend money to a company or project. They agree to pay you back with interest at a pre-agreed time. This is a medium to long-term investment strategy, which can be beneficial once you have a stable business or financial foundation. It is another smart way to invest while leveraging the concept of good debt. Step 4. Educate yourself to eliminate toxic debt. For Kiyosaki, the key to getting rich using debt is to educate yourself to eliminate toxic debt from your financial habits. To do this, you must recognize bad financial habits. Adopt sound financial and economic practices. Understand that financial mistakes at a small scale will be amplified at a larger scale. Toxic debt is borrowing money for non-essential expenses. Examples: taking out loans to buy material possessions, using credit to finance vacations. Since this type of debt does not generate income, it is considered financially harmful. Of course, Kiyosaki is not against spending money for enjoyment, but he advocates for balance and continuous financial education. Good debt versus bad debt, the key to financial freedom. Does being rich mean being debt-free? Becoming debt-free may not necessarily lead to financial success. Many people ask, is financial freedom all about getting out of debt? This is one of Kiyosaki's favorite topics. Most people believe that money problems are solved with money. They think that paying off all their debt will put them in a better financial position. However, as we've discussed before, the truth is, money problems are not solved with money, they are solved with financial education. Robert Kiyosaki's quote. Just as we have learned that your house is not an asset, saving is not always smart, we now see that getting out of debt is just as controversial. From a young age, we are taught to fear debt. But as Kiyosaki explains, there are actually two types of debt. Bad debt, the financial cancer of the middle and lower classes. Good debt, the secret tool of the rich. Final thoughts. Escaping the debt cycle is not just about paying off your debt. It's about learning how to use debt strategically to generate wealth, create passive income, achieve financial freedom. The bottom line: debt is not the problem. Lack of financial education is. Do you want to know how to turn debt into an asset? With these financial tips, you'll learn how to make the impossible possible. Do you know how to create wealth using debt? Yes, it may sound utopian, but the reality is that there is a method to achieve this. By following Robert Kiyosaki's techniques, you can avoid toxic debt and use debt strategically to generate wealth. Understanding bad debt with a simple example. To make the concept of bad debt clearer, imagine the following scenario. A brand new credit card arrives at your doorstep from your preferred bank. It's beautifully packaged in a colorful envelope, displaying images of happy people enjoying a beach vacation, sailing on a luxurious yacht, driving a new car, partying with friends. The envelope features tempting slogans such as, "Indulge in the luxury you always wanted," "The car of your dreams," "The down payment for your new home," or even worse, "Unforgettable vacations." All of this is accompanied by the phrase, "Lowest interest rate, guaranteed investment." At first, you think, "No way, I'm not activating this card." But then, all those images and messages come to mind, along with the thought of that big LCD screen with a home theater system you've been eyeing at your favorite store. Within 2 seconds, your decision changes. You head to the store, activate your card, and buy the TV. You justify it to yourself. "Well, I deserve it. The monthly payments are so small. I'll just put the card away and use it only for emergencies." The trap of bad debt. The real problem is that you don't put the card away well enough. And you don't actually use it only for emergencies. Before you know it, your credit limit is maxed out. Now, the happy, colorful envelopes are gone. Instead, you're getting letters from the bank, demanding that you pay off your debt or face serious consequences. In the worst-case scenario, you might refinance your home to pay off your credit card debt. End up with even more debt than before. Risk losing your house because you took on an even bigger financial burden. Remember, bigger financial problems require a higher financial IQ. As drastic as it sounds, this situation happens to 95% of people. And it could easily be avoided with financial education, not just more money. Good debt exists. There is another type of debt that our education system doesn't even seem to acknowledge. It is the foundation of financial leverage for the rich. The middle and lower classes don't get to understand good debt because their financial process is different. Poor people take on debt just to survive. The middle class takes on debt to buy luxuries, cars, vacations, houses, toys for their kids. The rich take on debt to increase their income. The wealthy leverage good debt to create assets. How can debt make me rich? We were all taught to never owe anyone money. Yet, most people in the world are in debt. Why? Because they lack financial education. The key to success, delaying gratification. The rich understand something important. Delay gratification, buy luxuries last. This means poor people go into debt just to survive. The middle class goes into debt to appear rich. The wealthy use debt to expand their businesses. Example of good debt in action. The number one habit of the wealthy. Using other people's money, OPM, whether from clients, banks, investors. They acquire good debt to build wealth. Now, let's take the same credit card scenario, but with a financially educated person. They understand the interest rate, the minimum monthly payment, how to avoid interest charges, how to invest the money wisely. They also want the new LCD TV. But they know that buying it on credit would create bad debt. Instead, they search for a real estate deal. They find a foreclosure property from someone who took on too much bad debt. They negotiate with the bank and buy the property using their new credit card for the down payment. They use the remaining credit to remodel the house. Once ready, they rent out the property. The rental income covers the mortgage payments. It also pays for the new TV they wanted. Once the debt is fully paid, they keep the property, own their home theater, and maintain a strong relationship with the bank. The bank then encourages them to take on more debt to finance bigger investments. The debt is covered by the tenants who rent the property. The financial cycle repeats, and the rich get richer. Debt of gratitude. Two different views on debt. My poor dad told me. Debt is bad. He avoided debt all his life, only using it for emergencies. That's what credit cards are for, he said. He worked hard to pay off his mortgage and saved money to buy everything in cash. My rich dad, however, had a different view. Some debt is bad, but some debt is good. For rich dad, using debt only for emergencies was actually the worst kind of debt. The power of good debt. My simple definition of good debt is debt that puts money in your pocket instead of taking it out. For example, if I use debt for a business opportunity, I only take it if the business generates enough cash flow to pay off the debt. It covers all expenses. It provides a good return on investment. This ensures that every month, I get passive income, which allows me to reinvest in more assets. Buy the luxuries I want, without financial strain. Final thought, a debt of gratitude. I owe my financial success to my rich dad for teaching me. Debt can make you rich, if it's good debt. The end of the book. Book created by Baute Production in Tampa, Florida, United States of America. The author's biography. Milco Baute Lopez, a Cuban writer, editor, and educator, has woven a fascinating trajectory over the decades. His pen, infused with passion and creativity, has been a beacon of knowledge and artistic expression since 1992 when he began enlightening the world with his insightful articles. The most significant chapter of his life was written on December 10, 1995, when Milco crossed borders and oceans to settle in the United States. This land of opportunities became his new home, and in 2001, with a profound sense of belonging, he embraced U.S. citizenship, merging his Cuban roots with his love for cultural diversity. The pursuit of knowledge and wisdom has always been a constant in Milco's life. This passionate autodidact, eager to nourish his intellect, embarked on a remarkable academic journey. He studied philosophy through an online course offered by the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and in 2016, he successfully completed his academic journey, becoming a graduate of this venerable institution. Milco Baute is not only an accomplished writer but also a prolific author. From 2008 to the present, he has given life to more than 100 books, showcasing his literary talent in both English and Spanish. In addition to his personal work, Milco plays a pivotal role in the publishing industry as an editor, writer, and distributor, collaborating with other authors to bring their stories to the world. One cannot fully grasp the rich palette of Milco's experiences without mentioning his technical background as a graduate in Cuba in 1986 as a technician in electrical power systems. This distinguished profession led him to practice his craft with skill for over 2 decades before his passion for writing and education led him down new paths. In summary, the life of Milco Baute Lopez is a symphony of creativity, perseverance, and dedication. His journey from the Cuban shores to the borders of the United States, through academic exploration and prolific literary production, is a testament to his unwavering spirit and commitment to cultural enrichment and knowledge in all its forms.